I like sort of gentle movement from one thing to another. So as you say, you see the colours connecting, using those same colours. They give me like a comfort blanket, if you like. So that I know that when I'm making something, that I'm going to look at it and feel happy when I'm making it. So these have been great because they give me.
Hello and welcome to the Chester Art Beat interview series. And today we have the fabulous Louisa Boyd, who is a multidisciplinary artist who works with paint, print and sculpture. So Louisa has worked as a professional artist for over 20 years, exhibiting both nationally and internationally, and her pieces are included in public and private collections worldwide. And she's recognised regularly through prestigious juried exhibitions, most recently including the Royal Academy Summer Exhibition over multiple years. And if you want to know more, check out the artist bio on our website. So she was invited in 2023 to show her work at Cheshire in the Palace in the Netherlands, where she had a sculptural work on show alongside works by Damien Hirst, Chris O'Philly, Alexander McQueen and Escher himself for their show celebrating 125 years since Escher's birth. And just like Escher, Louisa has always also been awarded a scholarship from the Queen Elizabeth Scholarship Trust in 2023 for developing her printmaking practice, which I'm sure we'll hear more about shortly. Louisa's work centres around the persistent human desire to belong within the natural world, considering environment and how we navigate place in her pieces. Her work features celestial symbols, sacred geometry, natural landmarks, and map-like imagery to describe a sense of belonging. Louisa's landscape paintings begin with mindful walking through Cheshire countryside and continue with loose gestural mark-making techniques in watercolour and acrylic to describe the essence of the environment, which she does back in the studio. She illustrates the nostalgic feeling of a place, the sense of belonging that comes with recognisable natural forms and landmarks, capturing the influences that the ever-changing light, seasons and weather have on the natural world. Her prints and sculptural works consider belonging from a more abstract perspective and are inspired by cartography, both celestial and terrestrial. She layers abstract drawn imagery made with traditional drawing tools and printmaking processes structured using sacred geometry and mathematics with more abstract painterly marks. The outcomes are a visual fusion of historic and contemporary ideas. And Louisa is about to join us right now here in the studio. So hello, Louisa, great to have you here.
Hi, Elizabeth, nice to chat to you. How are you?
I'm all right. How are you doing today?
It's not bad, thank you. Not bad, thanks.
Absolutely.
Oh, sorry. What a lovely introduction. Thank you so much.
Not a problem. I always feel it's important that people get a sense of who our artists are, because each one of you is so different. Your inspiration's so varied. And even if you consider the same place, we had somebody else doing the mid-Cheshire landscape, your work is so far removed from theirs, even though you both do mindful practice. So it's always exciting to get a feel of what's going on behind the thought processes, these technical processes, and all of it, who you are that you bring to your artwork. And we can see some behind you, in fact.
Yes, a few pieces here. I'm just in my studio at the moment, so I've got a few bits on the shelves at the moment. I'm working on some new ceramic pieces at the moment. They're actually right in front of me here. I'm not 100% sure whether they're going to be ready in time for the event, but they're my current sort of practice at the moment in the studio. But I work with landscapes, and all my work's inspired by nature and the natural surroundings, particularly in the Cheshire area.
Which means that you are local, and you say the Cheshire area. I would love to know, do you have a favourite place that you are most drawn to and return to time and again, or do you like to explore a variety of locations?
I'm quite habitual with where I go and walk through. I spend most of my time on Bickerton Hill, at that stretch of the Sandstone Trail, which is an absolutely beautiful place. I grew up walking that stretch when I was a young child with my family, and then moved away and then came back into the area, and now have a studio right at the bottom of Bickerton Hill. So it still sort of inspires me, and a lot of my work, because it's about belonging and having a sense of being connected to the area that you feel you belong in. That walking has become really integral to my practice. It sort of informs almost everything that I do back in the studio.
So would you feel a little lost if there was a day that you couldn't get out and walk before starting your artwork, or at least during that week?
Yeah, I think it tends to be more like once a week, because it's quite a busy juggle that I have going on with the various things that I'm doing with work. But yeah, certainly having that on the doorstep and having access to it is so important to me. It's so important to my well-being, but it's also important to the work that I make. I think that those two things are very interconnected. So sort of making the work makes me feel more like myself than anything else. But actually going out and walking around this area is another way of helping me to connect with myself and my own well-being.
Fabulous. I absolutely love that stretch. Bickerton Hill, I went there myself with my family as a child and have returned multiple times. In fact, I use it sometimes as a photo shoot location for portraits and families. So yeah.
It's so beautiful. I mean, the views are absolutely stunning, and I just think that there's something really grounding about the space up there. It just feels you feel very connected to the different elements when you're walking around there.
And beautiful tones. I can almost see some of the colours coming through within your artwork, and reminiscent, but I'll try and stay in the room and on task. So it sounds like you have been exploring the world of art as a career for a while now, many years. Is this your full-time line of work, or do you have any little side projects on the go in other areas?
I'm currently full-time as an artist. I do a little bit of teaching here and there, do some workshops and occasional sort of day workshops and visits to places, and sometimes I do a long weekend here or there. But the majority of my time is currently working full-time as an artist.
Oh, fabulous. Well, perhaps if anybody wants to know more about those things, I'm sure you'll post them regularly on your social channels and your website. So I would love to take a little time to delve into some of how you go from enjoying that landscape and from being in it and being present into creating something that is both so architectural and precise, but yet so free and abstract at the same time, because that really interests me, because I can see themes of both coming through, and the fact you talked about multimedia and layering things, I guess, is part of that process. But the floor is yours. Tell us more.
So I'm really interested in as a process with making art, with art making, and freedom, and this sort of idea that you can be very expressive with making work, but then use refining processes to make them feel more precise towards the end. So a lot of my pieces, whether they are my prints, which are quite abstract works that are inspired by map making, navigation, and sort of have a connection with the sense of belonging along those lines. They start with very abstract mark making, drawn marks, and using varnishes to protect copper plates so that they can be etched in quite a sort of an abstract fashion. Similarly, my paintings, this first layer down in my paintings is abstract mark making. It gets energy into the work, it gets a sense of freedom into the work, and that underpins all of the work that I do. But I'm interested then in sort of taking that thread and actually starting to refine it slightly later in the process, which is where you start to see some of the more architectural pieces that come in. So this is an example with this one of one of my landscapes. So you would start there with sort of very, well, initially I would tend to go out walking, and then I would come back to the studio and have a sort of a period of time where I was working with inks. This one particular is acrylics and inks onto a raw canvas, and I'd start to work with those colours that I wanted to bring back from the walk that I'd been on, and I'd work through the paints and come up with a series of abstract shapes, which I'd then pull out the landscape from. So they're not exact locations as such. They are more like sort of a feeling of a place, and they are meant to try and capture the sort of changing weather, the changing atmosphere as you walk through the land. And actually, when I'm walking, I don't sort of go out and paint and sketch. Occasionally, I'll take my camera out with me, but more than anything, I'm trying to just experience the moment, the time of year, the changes of light. And those things they happen too quick for you to record. So you just have to experience them. And that's what I want to bring back into my paintings and into the studio is that experience, that fleeting, shifting, very quick change of light and time.
Wow. I love what you said about taking what is fleeting and fast and bringing in the sense of change, because I really feel with the inks up in this top right corner, now other people will obviously see it differently than I do, but that sense of clouds and light shifting, and where the sun, or be it the moon, I'm not sure, has come in, but how you said you make the structural elements from the inks, because for me, I don't know what you intended, but I see trees here under the light. I see fields with their lines of run, where the farmers ploughed and set the crops in place. And I see a real sense of the sort of the sandstone trail of the Bickerton Hill, knowing the context, almost some of those walks and the more rugged landscape that goes with those. So
a lot of those elements that you picked out are the things that I would add in towards the end of the painting. So as you say, the sweeps, the sort of very large gestures of the inks, they tend to go in first, but then bringing either the sun, as you say, or the moon, this is the sun in this case, and the ploughed fields, those are things that come in later, and they're about me sort of picking out how I want that landscape to look after I have allowed the paints to dry. A lot of the work has, so it's got mixed media in there. There is actually like a metallic thread that runs through the pieces, and it's actually copper coloured in this picture. I use copper quite significantly in the work because, as you'll know, the area used to be an area of copper mining historically, and so that sort of theme runs underneath a lot of the work. And there's a lot of sort of ideas of those, sort of looking at how the landscape can be portrayed, but actually taking on board that sort of fast changing, fleeting weather, and bringing that into it as well at the same time.
Fabulous. So you mentioned about copper plates and still starting with the mark making and then adding varnish and so forth. Would that be part of the process from this piece just here?
Well, that would be talking about my etching prints, which are, as you say, as you can see, they're quite different from my landscape works, but they come from similar ideas. So they're still about how we connect with nature, how we navigate, how we find our way around based on sort of the natural world that surrounds us. But they are working in a more abstract fashion, really, rather than a literal sense. So with the landscapes, I'm looking at navigation, using sort of ideas like if you drive past a certain copse of trees, you would recognize it as being somewhere that connected you to your home. And sometimes you get that sense of feeling the ownership that, oh, they're my trees, I see those, they're there. So that's one sense, navigating, and finding our way home. With my prints and my sculptures as well, these sort of ideas about navigation they're put across in a slightly more abstract way. So this is an example of the sculptural work that I do, which also use those etching prints. But the prints are, so they're etching prints, so they're worked on copper plates again. So I have this sort of affiliation with copper metal. And so they're worked on copper plates, and they have that sort of abstract map-like imagery that is drawn into them. And I use the tools, a lot of the tools I use with them are similar tools that cartographers would have historically used to create their maps. So you get a real map-like feel just through the process, and the fact that they're made with printmaking techniques as well. And then I'll start to work with those in a three-dimensional way. So here you've got an example of a 20 25-piece sculpture. So each of these pieces, three-dimensional forms, has been made either with some marble paper, or it's been made with etching prints, my etchings similar to the image that was just shown before. And those are shaped into the 5 different platonic solids, and you can see those on repeat. So Plato suggested that each of these shapes had a connection with the elements of the earth, so fire, air, earth, water, and ether. So again, it's just that how we connect with the natural world, and it's using that imagery to help explain that connection, if you like. And again, just using these sort of ideas of method and process. I'm really interested in sort of historical techniques, traditional techniques, and a lot of my work uses those sort of the marble paper, the etching, techniques that have a real historical contents, just to talk about belonging really from a cultural perspective, as well as sort of from navigating a sense of place.
Wow. I love the depth that you have of meaning. Some artists have, I mean, I think every artist has a hint of themselves and a hint of their interests and a hint of a depth of meaning to their work, but you have drawn on such a varied number of sources, your journey in belonging, then historically map making and the tools that are used, and some philosophy, a bit of Plato, and an understanding of the natural world, but also the processes of the mark making and the current landscape culture. Would you say that this has always been how you've approached your artwork throughout your transition and different series throughout those 20, 30 years, or has that come about in more recent years in a search for more meaning as you move into a different season of life?
I think it's interesting. I think as you go through your career, the layers of what you're doing become more elaborate. And I think as someone who's really interested in feeling like they, you know, on a journey to find my own place essentially, and sort of hope that whilst I'm on that journey that other people connect with the work I make. I think if I pick up an idea and I see an idea that I think has a connection with what I'm making and with me, then I sort of carry that along, and then it gets used in different ways and continues to be used. So even in the pieces that I make, so I've got some of these sculptures that are loose here, even in the pieces I make here, I'm using bookbinding techniques in here, which is part of a different section of my art career where I made some artist books for a period of time. But again, that stays with me. There's elements of that there's threads that run through, and I might not make so many artist books anymore. I'm still very fond of the ones that I did, and books have quite a strong meaning to me. I still make sure that those are part of my practice because I have a connection with that aspect. So I sort of drag things along, if you like. So I do think I think that it builds and builds and builds as you continue to make work. You see the connections, you understand the connections, you start to understand more about yourself, don't you, as you through life anyway, and start to actually appreciate, oh, maybe that's why I'm doing things. And actually sometimes those things come afterwards. So I know, for example, when I'm looking at working, I've mentioned about the copper and the copper mines, that wasn't something where I went out and thought, oh, there used to be copper mines here, I will start working with copper. I just had a natural draw. I'm naturally drawn to using that tone in my work. There were these metallic threads which actually come from bookbinding processes that I've been putting into my paintings. And then I've been working away with copper as a metal with my printmaking. And then it was quite recently, I just thought to myself, gosh, you know, I hadn't actually thought about that, but it has got such a strong, I've got such a strong bond to that material, strong draw to it. And then I thought, oh, but of course I would have that because the area that I'm walking and that I was brought up in has a connection to that metal as well. And I think sometimes, you know, it's not, the thinking doesn't always come first, is what I'm saying. Sometimes the thinking, especially if you're a practicing artist, you're very interested in aesthetics, you're making things, and eventually things start to make sense. But I think a lot of the time you just do naturally, if that makes sense. And then you realize at a later date, oh, okay. And if you work with something for long enough, you start to realize those things even more, that actually, oh, that's why I was interested in that as a thread. And I'm still making work that has a connection to the work that I was making in my 20s. So I'm still making, I was making landscape work at that time. I was interested in nostalgia, ideas of home. All of that is still present. It just, I think it levels up. The longer you make and the longer you connect with an idea, the more you think around it, if you like, and take some time to consider it.
Yeah, I guess the ideas have the time to come forth, what's going on subconsciously, and the things that we're drawn to, we don't always have a logical understanding of, because we collect as emotively first. Even as children and babies, we have emotional memories before we have word-based memories, don't we? So it makes perfect sense. And what I absolutely love is that you aren't, although you're multimedia, you're still not stuck even in one form of mixed media, because you have those landscapes, but you also have the sculptural work, you have the printmaking. But yet what I see throughout them is that the series, the colours, the style of them, they work so well converging as a set, as a body of work, as a whole. And I can see you're drawn to very specific colours. Again, is this something that you've always felt and gone with, the same tones, or is this something you've moved into gradually and refined?
I sort of have periods of time where I quite obsessively work within one colour palette, and then I'll move on to another one. But I do find that the sort of muted tones they're a constant, if you like.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, but it does really depend on what time it is that I'm working with. I will sort of work, and I find that helps me to make the work connect. It's really kind that you say that the work connects. Quite a lot of when I'm exhibiting, when I exhibit my own work, I tend to mix them all together. But a lot of the galleries that I work with will take different strands of the work, so they will either represent me with my landscape works, or they'll represent with the abstract works or the sculptural works. So it's nice for me to have an opportunity to show them together, because there are connections within it. It's just that often I don't have the space when I'm showing in galleries to actually show that breadth across the board. So a gallery would just select sort of one aspect or another to include.
Mm-hmm. Even your feed, the tones all come through, and that sense of tying them together. But you can also see in galleries where what they've allowed you to exhibit, or what fits in with that particular exhibition, I suppose, in some cases, because there are themes within exhibitions themselves as well, aren't they, when you're joining with other artists and other settings. But one of the things I wanted to highlight and question was, you talked about using the paper and so forth to create the forms, the structural forms. However, here it looks to me very much like you're using a clay-based or heavier, weightier medium, and I see some of the tools. So where are we up to in that development? You said you're not expecting it maybe to be ready for Artbeat, but perhaps you might bring us some of the behind the scenes, some of the process work, so we can see what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just currently, so earlier this year, the sort of time of the year where the art world goes a little bit quiet at the early start part of the year, I did some experimental work looking at creating, using my some of my etching plates to create textures into clay, and started to look at creating some three-dimensional pieces. And I just made 5 pieces, and I actually had some support from one of your other exhibiting artists, ceramic botanist, Louisa Boyd. She supported me to make those first 5 pieces, and gave me a session in her studio to show me a few bits and bobs to do with the clay that I'm using. And they really have received a really great response. So I've sort of, my Instagram at the moment is sort of designated to the development of these clay pieces, which I'm sort of building at the moment, quite a large group of them. Again, they're working with the platonic solids. I'm using the plates from my etching prints, so they have a really strong connection with the etchings, and then I'm hand drawing into the clay to give it a little bit more detail so that they have even more connection, and they will then be glazed with a stain, and you can see one of the completed ones actually in the background of that video.
In the top left corner a minute ago.
Yeah,
I'm
that's
sure it will
right.
repeat in a second.
I've got one behind me that I can show you.
Oh, fabulous. Let me stop the screen share so we can see properly, slightly larger.
So this is one of the experimental pieces that I did earlier this year, and was really delighted with the outcomes, and also just with the process. Just nice to do something different. I mean, a lot of my work is I just love experimenting with different things and finding a different way of using things that connects with what I've already done.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just interested in exploring materials, really, and I like sort of gentle movement from one thing to another. So as you say, you see the colours connecting, using those same colours. They give me like a comfort blanket, if you like. So that I know that when I'm making something, that I'm going to look at it and feel happy when I'm making it. So these have been great because they give me, you know, this is the paper sculpture, and this is an example of the clay one. That's the one that's it's incomplete. I'm just working at the moment, and then it will be something like this once it's glazed with a stain on it. So there's sort of underlying connections, and things are sort of moving very slowly. I like things to move very slowly. I like there to be contact from one thing that I do to another. And when you look at the work as a whole, sometimes it looks like things are quite disparate, but they're really not. There's sort of threads that are running all the way through the different aspects of the work. The lines and the marks in the etchings and in the ceramics can be seen in my paintings. You know, if you come up to them, there are linear qualities to them, and dots and lines and circles, and all of those are things that they're sort of aesthetic strands that run all the way through the different works.
I think it's fabulous also that you're not in a hurry in a society that is plagued by rush and hurry and the next new thing. It's so nice to see you take that element that we find in nature and landscapes, where it's in no hurry. It gradually shifts and changes, the meandering river that changes the oxbow over time as it wears away and it works its way in. You have the same qualities in your development process, rather than rushing. And I think that gives a sense of peace to your work, actually, personally. Now, there is a place for passion and excitement and harsh energy, you know, even with the weather, but I see elements of that too in some of the bolder, darker, more striking work, like we looked at in the landscape with the ink that came across and had a real forcefulness to it, but there was still that quality of peace, which I think possibly you may feel differently, but comes from taking your time to develop it and see those themes run through, and to keep the connection.
Thank you. Well, that's very nice of you to say. Thank you.
So one of the things of being a full-time artist is exhibiting. We've touched upon this briefly, but you also mentioned exhibiting alongside Escher in the 125 years at a palace of all places, internationally. So how was that for you? Taking overseas?
Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those experiences that was just, yeah, it was a phenomenal experience, and really did come very much out of the blue. I just received an email from the curator requesting they'd seen one of the 25-piece sculptures in the pictures of it in the Royal Academy summer exhibition last year, and had this exhibition in the pipeline, and they needed another piece for their mathematics room in Esher, and contacted me and asked if it would be at all possible for them to have one, which of course it was no problem at all. So I sent that out to them, but it was an amazing experience, and Escher for me has been an artist that was inspiring to me as a child. I'm pretty sure it's one of the reasons that I have such a sort of interest in geometric art, because those images are present in his work as well. And to be asked and invited to show somewhere like that, I was just pretty bowled over, to be honest. And it was amazing. We got to go out and visit, and got to see the piece out there as well, as did my family, which was lovely for them.
Wow.
So that's really nice. And yeah, just an amazing experience. And I think when you're working away in the studio, you post these things on the internet, and you just don't ever really think anybody's really looking at them in that much detail, and then somebody emails you out of the blue, and it was just a wonderful invitation, and a beautiful museum actually. And I was really glad that there was a reason that I'd managed to get out there to see it. So yeah, it's fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah. And I love what you've just shared there, specifically that you never know who's looking, you never know who's watching. I don't know whether you've found this, but I've often found the people who comment and engage are fabulous, and they're engaging online, but then you have the silent watchers too. So I love engaging with people who are enjoying the work, appreciating it, and being more vocal about it. But I also am aware that there's some people I will never meet and never see, and never maybe even know until that moment comes when there's a right fit for a contact, for a project, for a commission, for an artwork to be in an exhibition or whatever that might be. So I'd love to encourage any artists who are watching, don't be struck by the vanity metrics, how many likes, how many shares your posts are getting, because actually they're not the things that have the biggest impact. They're a marker of the people who are most capable of engaging with social media, and not a lot more. They're extremely silent. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I do think that there's a lot going on in the background. I mean, we've never ever we've lived in an environment where we've got more opportunity as individuals sat in our very own specific places dotted around the country. We've got more opportunity than we've ever had before, because of the internet, because the way because of social media, how things can be shared, how we can be connected to people who have come from all sorts of different walks of life. And it's a lot of it is about consistency with social media. It's about just continuing to share what you're doing. I think the other nice thing about it, which I find from a personal perspective, is the fact that actually it does really encourage me to keep developing, because I don't want to go to a feed and just see the same stuff being posted and posted and posted. What I want to see when I look at another artist is how their work develops and how it changes, and that in itself encourages me to do those things as well. So, in some senses, it's an area that you can reflect on. So you use it almost as a tool for personal development, and sort of look at what you've done before and look at what's been successful, and try and take those sort of strands forward. But there's a lot more to it, I suppose, what I'm saying, than the sort of the surface level of posting. See it as almost like a reflective diary of making. And certainly with the ceramics recently, I've been posting about them and talking about how I'm making them, how I'm developing them, and actually, these are something that I've really enjoyed doing. They've been a successful experiment. I do many experiments that don't get around and don't work. That is part and parcel of developing. But actually giving these a bit of a platform on the Instagram is a reminder for me that actually sometimes these experiments, they can really work really well, and they can then encourage you to just do something, take a risk again, if you like, because it's so easy when you're making all the time and you're working full time as an artist, just to keep on making the things that are getting a good response. Don't put yourself out there, don't take any risks. There's always more than enough to do with what you're already doing. But actually, this has been a real reminder of me that actually sometimes you do need to just try something completely different and see what happens. Sometimes it works, sometimes it really doesn't. And that just depends on what it is you're working with, and both of those things are okay, and okay to share as well.
I think the process, because like you said, the journey, the exploration, and the threads you continue to weave through, it's a good reminder to all of us, actually, that when an experiment doesn't work, that doesn't mean that it's a failure. It just means that we are developing, and those lessons will be brought into whatever we create next. But aside from that, I love the idea of taking a risk and not just making the crowd pleasers, but allowing yourself to try other things at the same time. It's an interesting concept when it comes into, am I putting my identity in how many people like my work, or am I creating something that's going to have an impact and that I can appreciate and develop in the process?
Absolutely. And I do think there's, it's a fine balance, because life nowadays is fast and busy, and there's a lot going on, and actually most of us are juggling far more than we can manage in the first place. So finding time to step outside of all of that, I know that I really struggle to do that. I really struggle to take the days, the weeks that are required to do something that might have no impact at all. And that's the issue. I speak to I can't speak for other people, but I know for myself, I'm so tied up in being productive a lot of the time. And that's not just in my artwork, that's in almost every aspect of my life. I'm so tied up in being productive. My walking takes me out of that. My artwork to an extent takes me out of it, but because it's my job, it gets a sort of little bit tangled up with being productive as well. So doing the experimentation, sometimes I have to really have quite a serious word with myself and say, no, this is as important. It's as important to take that time out. And it doesn't matter if at the end of that week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, what you have doesn't go anywhere and it can just go away. I find that sometimes really difficult, but when it works, if it works on the occasions that it does, then it's been a really valuable process. And it's that, I think that's sometimes quite a difficult thing to get my head around. But I do feel with the ceramics, I feel like there's been a real step in the right direction with them. So it'll be interesting. As I say, I'm not quite sure they'll be ready for that weekend, but they might be ready for the open studio. So we can maybe encourage people to come to that and see if they can see them.
Oh yes, your open studio. Did you say that was the 14th of July after Artbeat?
Yeah, so I'll be having an open studio the weekend after Artbeat, so the 14th of July. Is that right? That is the 14th. Yes, it was the weekend after. So if anybody wanted to contact me via social media or my email address to find out more details about that, they can. Or of course can come and see me. I'm at the O Foundation shop, and come and chat to me about it, and I'll happily give you the information there. And yes, you can find your way to the studio the following weekend as well if you want a couple of art weekends in the run.
Fabulous. So yes, I will drop your contact details, Louisa. Hang on, where is it? louisaboyd@hotmail.com, and also on the socials, it is obviously Louisa_Boyd on Instagram, or it's Louisa Boyd Art on Facebook. And to keep everything nicely flowing, it's www.louisaboyd.com if you wish to visit her website. But we will be so excited to have you in the Design Foundation, which is Upper Bridge Street. And the map is coming out, so you can see exactly where she is, and you'll find her detailed on there. It's been fabulous to talk to you, Louisa. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. It's been lovely to chat to you too.
And we wish you all the best with your upcoming shows and creations and the development of these new ceramic pieces.
Thank you. That's lovely. Thanks for your time today. Anyway, it's been lovely to chat.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you.